Down the home stretch in the NFL 2022 exit report, ambitious schedule. We've got two teams left, and we've left the best for last. Philadelphia and Kansas City, the two Super Bowl participants, not much over 2 weeks ago, and we're ready to talk how they got there and what's next with Jeff Dawson from ECS Sports. And first of all, Jeff, how are you doing? Thanks for coming on.
I'm doing great. For me, I think like you, I'm glad the pigskin is on the shelf. It allows us to now concentrate on other things. For you, a little downtime before you dig back into the 2023-2024 season. But I'm glad that the Super Bowl is over.
Yeah, it does get to be a long season. I actually appreciate the 2 weeks before the Super Bowl because there's no other game to handicap, and that game is dissected left, right, and center. There's nothing that needs to be done there. It starts the downtime. I use this time to do what I'm doing, kind of a rehash over my own metrics, how they worked, how they didn't. And this year, networking with yourself and others has really enhanced that process. Then some more downtime for us that are just doing football, but a lot to discuss with the Eagles. And I believe it started in middle of 2021, as I said, when they established an identity, when they decided in that early mini bye week to say, hey, we're not a passing team. We're going to design the offense after Jalen Hurts. They roared to the playoffs. They got to the playoffs. They didn't win in the playoffs. They didn't beat any playoff teams in 2021. But like you hinted at offline before we started, a plan was in place. And we're going to talk about Howie Roseman because he is my GM of the year.
100%. Not to cross sports, but in the NBA, to be the champ, it takes a few years. You got to knock off certain teams to get to that plateau. And hats off and spot on, Ron, for the fact that the Philly got to the playoffs. They didn't win, but they saw where their faults were. They put the plan in place, and you're spot on GM of the year. Absolutely, no doubt.
So this is a 5-point plan, in my opinion, and it took like 6 months to get to it, but it's just amazing the tunnel vision this organization had. It starts in free agency, and they add Hassan Reddick, who was a monster help to them. This is a team that is used to sacking teams 40 plus times a game, but in 2021, looking back now, it seems crazy, but they only had 29 sacks in 2021. So the first piece is Hassan Reddick. And then we see for the third time in 4 years that Philadelphia leapfrogs another team to get a player they want. They leapfrog for Devontae Smith against Dallas wanted him dearly. They took the defensive tackle Davis ahead of Baltimore, who wanted him. What were your thoughts on draft day when they were maneuvering to get Davis? And then plan 3, what about that wide receiver? And then they trade for a really strong wide receiver.
The vision, the process on draft day, for me locally in New England, it's almost like we trade down because we don't draft well. So I don't want to make a mistake in the first round. I'm going to stockpile the second, third, fourth, and fifth rounders. So if we make a mistake, it won't cost as much. Where the Eagles, 2 amazing picks, but the cherry on top was to get AJ Brown. As I said backstage to you, leading up into last year, they completed just 10 passes across the middle before AJ Brown. They bring in AJ Brown, and it was just amazing, that presence, that guy coming across the middle, just then bumps up Devontae Smith to another level. Then you add Goddard as a great pass catching tight end. You could not have formulated a better plan, and never mind formulating it, it worked.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're talking about a team that's everybody typecast them as, well, they're only a run team. But now you got Devontae Smith in year 2, and you got AJ Brown, who's well established. So now you have that run pass balance that they covet, and they have depth at all these positions. And they drafted later on, they took draft dropper, I think it's Nakobe Dean the gentleman from Georgia in the third round. And they have big plans for him. He dropped due to perceived medical reasons, I believe, but he had started 25 games in his previous 2 years. So I thought that was another value-added play. And then they go ahead and they said, we're not done yet. We know we have to fix the secondary. They gave up a lot of splash plays. Your thoughts on May 18th? They take somebody from the division. They take Bradbury, the cornerback from the Giants, and they insert him into their starting lineup.
Listen, if you can make these thieveries in division, what better way? Listen, Bill Belichick is famous for grabbing guys in the division 2 weeks prior to playing that team so he can pick their brain when they come up 2 weeks later. Some people's so-called trash is other people's treasures. And the Philly, again, saw something there, plug and play and instant gratification.
Yeah, it's really amazing that they were still building and they weren't done. We don't even start the season. It's August, not done yet. Famous saying from the college baseball world. Sorry, Arkansas fans. But we have another signing. We have Chauncey Gardner Johnson on August 30th to complete the transformation of the defense. And these are not just guys you think, well, I hope they can contribute. These are guys who have contributed in the NFL. And now the upgrade is complete. Wide receiver, markedly improved. Defensive secondary, markedly improved, at least on paper, heading into the 2022 season. I have to tell you, Jeff, that at draft time 2022, I had Dallas a decent size ahead of Philadelphia. By the end of August, they were dead even for me. This completes the package. Where was Philadelphia in relation to Dallas for you as we started September?
I always think every year Dallas is always inflated. And so I was in the same boat as you. Vegas knows how much money's the following that the Cowboys have. It's been 3 decades almost since they've won a Super Bowl again, and every year they're the team. They're the team that's going to win. And I just thought they were, I don't like to say giving away free money, because I had thought there was a big drop down to the Giants and the Commanders. So again, I know a lot of people in our lanes that said, hey, you know what? I can get a little stake in Dallas. I can get a little stake in the Eagles. Let's see how this plays out. And then if one of the teams runs and hide, then you can come back in on another side. But I had the Eagles slightly ahead, not by a lot, but just a little after all their moves.
Yeah, I think that was the people that I network with and so on. They're saying they were saying a little ahead of the curve. Watch these Eagles, watch these Eagles. And when I put all this together, easy to put it together now. I was starting to put it together before. I said, yeah, something. The Eagles are right there, if not ahead. I had 3 keys coming into the season that I wrote on my team sheets. So I'm going to read them off. I'd like you to comment on them. And then any other keys you had, even though we say, okay, now the Eagles are ready to go, any other concerns and so on. So the first thing was that Hassan Reddick whole thing. I'm not used to them having just 29 sacks. We know what happened in 2022, but at the time that I wrote this in August, I said, this is a key. They've got Hassan Reddick. They've got enough pass rushers. They've got to move that number back up. I bumped it up close to 40, which was just slightly above average. Obviously, they exceeded that, but that was an area I was looking at. Second area was, okay, now they added the 2 guys. How fast would that chemistry go? They allowed a lot of splash plays before. Another key for me. And as we'll see, the third key, Hurts was not all that accurate, not inaccurate in his 2021 season. Could he take the next step in his accuracy with an improved roster? Now, we know as we're going to go through that they didn't meet these keys. They exceeded these keys big time, but those were my keys starting the season. What were your thoughts starting the season?
Defensively and the pass rush, as you were putting the pieces together, my initial thought, Ron, was they weren't building this defense to win the East. They were building this defense and this secondary, for the Tom Brady's, for the elite quarterbacks, maybe out west. Maybe they were taking a look at the Rams, for instance. We don't know the unsurety, obviously, of what was going on with the 49ers situation, but Kyler Murray comes to mind as well. They weren't building it, in my eyes, for Daniel Jones or Carson Wentz. And so right there, yeah, obviously Dak offense, with Lamb, with Schultz. So that was built also for them. Far exceeded expectations, and especially at home. Everyone knows when you try to go into Philadelphia and win, never mind their Sunday night games, their Monday night games, you give these guys a night game and forget about it. I mean, the odds of you coming out as an opponent with a victory are slim to none. And the only one, hats off, I think it was the Commanders stunned them on that Monday night. I think 8, 9, 10-point underdogs there. Jalen Hurts, we did not know, would he make the next level? Would he take the next jump? In my eyes, Jalen was a take the snap, look to his left, the first read, and then as soon as he saw that person covered, it was run. And he did it effectively, but we didn't see the pass accuracy as elite as it was. And you look at the Super Bowl game, he was dropping dimes, and people were shaking their heads saying, "Oh, wait a minute, who is this guy?" And AJ Brown just comes right in and fits right in. But I think one of the big keys, and nothing taken away from Gainwell, nothing taken away from Scott, who got his normal almost double-digit touchdowns against the Giants again. That's an instant auto play when the Giants play the Eagles. Just anytime touchdown, Mr. Scott, and you'll cash that one. Just how effective they were. And the fact that Miles Sanders stayed healthy. And it's just comical that it was a contract year. I don't think Miles Sanders will be back next year, but he stayed healthy. I think the Eagles will be ready to move on with Gainwell, with Scott, probably draft another back late in the draft this year. But I think one of the big keys to success for Philly was the fact that Miles stayed healthy.
Okay, I'm making a note. Revisit Miles Sanders at the end of this show. I want to go back on that too. But I like your point well taken about seeing the big picture with Philadelphia, that they were looking beyond the division. I hadn't really thought about that when I was thinking September and so on, but you could see these moves in retrospect. Good call on your part. Did you have any futures regarding the Philadelphia Eagles, division, anything?
I have to be 100% honest. The only number that we had that if we could have cashed at halftime of the Super Bowl, we had Jalen Hurts at plus 650 to win the Super Bowl MVP before the playoffs started. We needed some Philadelphia coverage, and we needed some Kansas City coverage. We had Mahomes plus the 400 to win the Super Bowl MVP there. But at halftime, Jalen Hurts had already won the Super Bowl. And even after the game, I know they wouldn't do it, but I'm like, geez, you could do co-MVPs here. I mean, Jalen Hurts had an amazing game. I never got in. We took a swing with the Niners in mid-November at 14-1, had a couple other smaller plays. Looked at them, but when they got off to such a hot start, Ron, I just thought at that point that the price, as you would like to say, the value it was gone. I couldn't get in.
Yeah, exactly. And I had no preseason futures. Philly wasn't on my radar since I mostly am somebody who looks to fade teams, go under season win totals. Philly was not going to be an under, not in that division, not the way it shaped up at the beginning. If anything, I was late to the parties thinking, they could win the division, but that price had already come down by the time kickoff had gone. So I was on the sidelines as well, watched them go through that 5-0 start. And I think in quartiles, the NFL thinks in quartiles. So I wait 4 weeks and then I look at, okay, what's transpiring? Are they meeting my goals? The stuff that I write on my team sheets, are they exceeding my goals? And basically, I couldn't quite tell with the sack ratio. I knew sacks were up 17, but they'd also allowed 11 sacks. What they had, and this is through games 5, 6, 7, what I thought would be an unsustainable and an incredible plus 15 turnover ratio. I think it was plus 12 in those first 4 or 5 games. So that's part random, part we saw that Jalen Hurts doesn't turn the ball over. So at that point, I realized, yeah, they're going to be plus in the turnover ratio, but how can they keep having a plus 2.5, plus 3 turnovers per game, range? So I thought there could be some comeback to the pack. They looked like a good team. They looked like a much better defensive team, but I hadn't yet got to the point until after they defeated Dallas week 6, saying that, wait a second, now they're entering my top 5, 6 teams. Where were you in terms of the pecking order of Philadelphia with the rest of the league as the season rolled along?
And I forgot to mention this too. When you talked as the season started, what also kept us outside of not getting into Philly was when Dak got injured immediately. Insert Cooper Rush. And so right away there, you couldn't get, in my eyes, I couldn't get into Philly at that point because they were saying, all the right things. Dak was coming back, but the mindset was, well, Cooper Rush wasn't going to go 4-1 or whatever he went. The season was over for Dallas and most people's thoughts. And then I'm looking at Daniel Jones and the Giants. I'm like, no. And then we knew what was going on with the Commanders. So I just, again, with that Dak injury especially, didn't enable us to jump in early and see the light saying, hey, you know what? This is the team. But the start of the year, and I don't know exactly the game that the light bulb went on. I know we lost. It was a Monday night game against Minnesota, I think. They were 2.5 point or 3 point favorites against the Vikings. I love the Vikings in that spot. I knew prime time Kirk Cousins and his record, but I thought Justin Jefferson was going to be the focal point. He was going to be the separator. And Darius Slay just said, not in my house. And the light went on right there, Ron. And I was like, okay. And as you could see, the foundations in the NFC, the problems with the Bucks, the problems with some other teams, this was definitely going to be a team to reckon with in the NFC.
Yeah, good point there. And it all came down to the stretch, 2 things. Number one, that yards per reception number that was high against Philly dropped to a really, really stout 10.1 yards per completion against them. So they were preventing big plays. And then the end of the year, they went crazy. I mean, they took it to another level. What was it? Something like 34 sacks on defense in the last 6 games. For Atlanta, that's 2 seasons worth, unfortunately, because they get a sack a game and they got 34 in 6 games. Now, they did lose Jalen Hurts for a couple of games, and they hoped to rest him for 3. In retrospect, it was probably good that he had to come back and get the rust off in that week 18 to secure the division, to secure the number 1 seed. It's a long season for teams. And now we had a little bit of uncertainty in terms of, well, how healthy is Hurts? But coming into the season, coming into the playoffs, I thought when I looked at those 7 teams, only San Francisco and only Philadelphia qualified as a legit NFC playoff contender. You talked about what you did with Hurts as far as possible MVP when the playoffs started. That must have meant that you thought Philadelphia was going to make a deep run.
I thought definitely they were going to make a deep run, and the only team that I thought that would get in their way was the 49ers, and we were holding the 14-1 on the 49ers. So that was kind of our offset play in the NFC. It's the same as in the AFC. The plus 400 on Mahomes Super Bowl was offsetting the Bengals 13-1 that we got in November. And we had some August slips with Buffalo AFC champs and some Super Bowl champs like most of the world did. And we saw those go up in flames. And I did want to add this, Ron, and I'll be real interested in the off season when you start to dig into the numbers for the following season. You're talking about the sacks on the Eagles. The Eagles were the number one team in the NFL for scoring in the second quarter, and it wasn't even close. And I thought as my mind progresses, when you're going into halftime up 7, 10, 13 points, the other team now has to get away a lot of times from their game plan, and they might be passing a little more than they want to be. Therefore, again, the edge rushing and the blitzes are getting more opportunities for sacks, and because the team is pressing. So I'll be interested to see how the sack numbers that they had this year versus where you have them coming into next year.
I love the discussion. Thank you so much for the talking points there, because one of the things I've contended for a year and a half, Washington did it in Philly's only loss, is you can run right at the Eagles, but teams don't want to do it. Or, like you said, if they're going to score and take you out of the game or take you out of your game plan by halftime, they don't commit to the run in the second half to get back in the game. Kansas City actually did in the Super Bowl. We'll talk about that a little. Kansas City shockingly outrushed Philadelphia, even with Jalen Hurts in terms of the Super Bowl. They stuck to a particular game plan. But teams kind of shied away from that for Philadelphia, and that's been about an 18-month thing. So I agree with you. There are still a couple of holes on Philadelphia that weren't exploited. But in the playoffs, it was a weird vibe in the playoffs. Obviously, the San Francisco game in the second half became a scrimmage because there were no San Francisco quarterbacks left on the roster, basically, who could throw a forward pass. But 31-7 and 38-7, they just dominated. And a lot of people said, well, wait a second, Philadelphia hasn't faced any quarterback. Philadelphia hasn't faced teams at full strength. Kansas City's been battle tested. I want to say, as a neutral observer in the Super Bowl, that was unfair criticism of Philadelphia, because I think they did what they had to do. They're so balanced offensively. They found a way against most teams. Now, Hurts was contained in the first half against a San Francisco defense that had a great game plan. But you think some of that criticism was a little bit over the top in terms of who they played?
100%. And to follow up the last comments that you made about you can attack Philly by running straight at them, we have Dan Alexander at Newbie Talks, who's a season ticket holder for Philadelphia, on every week. And he would come on religiously and say, I'm scared of this team. I'm scared of this team because they can run straight at us. And again, these teams get out of their comfort zone because now they're down 7, 10, 13, and they're chasing. So, like the Giant game, they got behind so early, they take Barkley right out of the game unless you're going to do dump passes. The San Francisco game, first drive, I think it was, they lose a quarterback. Then 2 drives later, they lose another quarterback. In comes McCaffrey. You can only play what the NFL schedule gives you. Yeah. And it was unfair to them. And I think what was also unfair was the public perception. 38-7 and 31-7. And then what did they see? They saw a Kansas City team against the Bengals with Mahomes on one foot, and they didn't have one starting wide receiver left other than Kelce to finish that game. And so as soon as the opening number comes out, everyone's sitting on their apps or at the casino saying, this is free money. Give me the plus 2.5. Give me the plus 2. Give me the plus 1.5. Give me it even. And they ended up to be 2-point favorites at one point.
Yeah, that's right. So let's talk Super Bowl. And I want you to go first. How did you handicap the Super Bowl in terms of how did you think it was going to play out? Figuring that we had a little bit of concern about Mahomes, but we knew he was going to go somehow in that game.
For us here at ECSI, I am a firm believer in respecting and trusting the opening number. And I put my eyes and my team against anyone when it comes to reading the market. And Jeffrey Benson and Matt Metcalf posted that 2.5 number. Kansas City favored 15 minutes after the championship was over, and they received 25 bets. 22 of them were all on the Eagles. And they said to themselves, well, I guess we read this one wrong. Well, again, the Mecca on Fremont Street stands as the right place at the right time. When the bottom line came, I had this game 28-23, Kansas City. I had Mahomes. And it was funny. I bring back the San Francisco Kansas City Super Bowl where San Fran, I don't want to say dominate, but controlled the first half. They controlled the third quarter. They went into the fourth quarter up 10. And when Jimmy G had to make a throw, he just missed. Mahomes gets the ball late. They found a way to win. And that's how we saw the Super Bowl coming. Not that Jalen Hurts did anything wrong. Okay. It was just the fact they couldn't have written a better first half script. They dominated the time of possession. It was that one fumble by Jalen Hurts that turned the scoop and score to which could have been a 17-7 or 21-7 into a 14-14 game. The 13-minute halftime show that turns into a 29-minute halftime show gave Mahomes, who was limping again right before the end of the half, extra 15 minutes to do whatever they had to do. For them to come out in the second half to score immediately, we knew we had a ball game. And the bottom line, as I said to you backstage, is I just think at the end of the day, Andy Reid plus Mahomes was the difference.
Yeah, and a lot of people kind of had that same mindset coming into the game. My metrics, if I took out the names of the uniforms, I had Philadelphia as a slight favorite in the game. So I didn't see a lot of value. I handicapped the game. It looked to me like it was going to be a bit higher scoring than people thought. But otherwise, there's something about Kansas City. Again, one team has Mahomes and the other team doesn't. Not to take away from Jalen Hurts, who just put on a tremendous performance. But what happened at halftime, I thought, was just unbelievable. And maybe the 29 minutes makes a difference as opposed to the 13 minutes. We saw adjustments on both sides of the ball, and I have to give both coordinators and Andy Reid credit. Jalen Hurts was not allowed to run in the second half the way he did. I thought Spagnuolo on the defensive end made some unbelievable critical adjustments. And I don't know if it's Eric Bieniemy and a combination with Andy Reid. I don't know how much Bieniemy matters or not matters. I'd like to say he does matter. But those two scripted touchdowns where they put a guy in motion and they saw something in Philadelphia that that led them to believe that those guys could score touchdowns by doubling back the other way, and they scored it with ease. The adjustments that were made at halftime, if they played this game without a halftime, Philadelphia was going to win, in my opinion. But they played it with a halftime, and I was just so impressed with the adjustments Kansas City made on both sides of the ball.
And again, I think the fact that this was their third Super Bowl and the fact that they've been there before. A question was asked to me, and I don't think we did a show in between, and I don't get stopped in my tracks. And this stopped me in my tracks. I was on someone's show, and they say, Jeff, what would the line have been if we flip-flop quarterbacks and Mahomes was the quarterback for the Philadelphia Eagles and Jalen Hurts was the quarterback for the Chiefs? And I had to stop in my tracks. And these guys came out and said 7 or 7.5 that the Eagles would have been favored. The Eagles would have been favored with Mahomes. So that's how much of a difference that they thought that Pat would make. But I think you nailed it, Ron. The fact is, again, first time at the dance versus your third time at the dance. And that was obviously not Andy's third time there. He's been there before. And now locally they're comparing, Pat's on 5 seasons, 5 AFC championships, 3 Super Bowls, 2 Super Bowl champs, 2 Super Bowl MVPs. The locals don't want to hear that because now he's almost outpacing, Sir Tom Brady, of course, and no one can walk in his shoes. But I think this just gives so much more credibility to Andy Reid. again, I same as you about Eric Bieniemy. They bring Nagy in now. Maybe Eric needed a change of scenery. I hope he does well in Washington. Uh, but I just think when it was all said and done, the fact that they had been there before and the adjustments was the telling tale right there.
So looking back, Philadelphia, once they get over the loss, the fans, the team have to feel great about what happened. And it's repeatable to an extent for me because of the way Rosen operates, because Hurts is on that rookie contract, because they have young wide receivers and so on. But we got a series of questions to ask you now. You've got a billion free agency decisions. If I'm correct, the entire defensive line, I know they rotate a lot, but 4 of them are free agents, unrestricted free agents. What do you do, first of all, with the defensive line? How many can you sign?
I guess that's the $1 billion question, not million anymore. Listen, they were able to put a plan in place last year, as you said, for as well. I have no doubt they're going to figure this out. But again, it was such a dominant force, such a big part of their success. It's like you can't go and sign all 4 because now obviously you're taking away some monies and some other positions that now you're going to be sitting there scratching your head. I think they'll figure it out. Maybe they sign 2 and let 2 go, but they already have 2 more that they know they can bring in for cheaper dollars. It's going to be very interesting, and everyone's watching because what they have done the last couple of years and how they have built this, and looking at their division, Ron, they're not going anywhere. They're going to be there as long as they can keep Jalen upright, keep that defense sacking people, and those wide receivers with A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith, keep them healthy with Goddard. They're going to be a force to reckon with.
So I did an exit report on Minnesota with Drew Dinsick, well respected in the field like yourself, yes. And he stunned me a little bit. He said, "I don't know if they keep Delvin Cook." Now you mentioned Miles Sanders, so that was Miles Sanders. So what are your thoughts there? Let's flesh that out a little bit.
About Miles or about Minnesota?
About Miles Sanders.
I have been a big fan for a long, long time. I enjoyed watching him growing up as a kid over at Penn State and high expectations. And that takes it also to the fantasy level. The kid's got talent. He's quick. He can catch the ball out of the backfield. The problem was he just couldn't stay healthy. And the fact is that they have a 3-headed monster back there with Gainwell, with Boston Scott. When you talked about having to sign all these free agents, I think he's now more of a luxury. I don't think they'll miss a beat. If they move off of Miles Sanders, they can move Gainwell and Scott up, and then they can grab someone off of, I don't think, for instance, the Patriots are re-signing Damian Harris. Not that the Eagles will come and grab him, but there's enough of those pass-catching backs that they can add, and they can move them now below Gainwell and Scott, and I don't think they'll miss a beat.
Yeah, it's interesting because running backs tend to be expendable. We know that. It's an interesting running back group of potential free agents, and it's an incredible, since I cover the draft, this is the best running back crop coming out of college in the last 10 years. Miles Sanders, I thought Philly did an exceptional job of limiting his carries, sometimes too limiting, where he'd have one, and they'd look at the stat sheet and wait, he only carried 2 times in the first half or something like that, and then they beef it up. But they helped keep him healthy by monitoring his workload. I thought they did a great job. I would keep him another year because I still think he has those young legs. That's good enough. But if it's a monetary decision, I understand that it comes down.
I do a lot of shows with Brady Tinker from Dallas. He covers Dallas and he does some work with the Chiefs. I'm going to ask you a crazy question. And because I ask him all the time on the Dallas side, the Eagles now, don't they have an early pick because of a trade in the 31st pick too?
They have the 10th and the third. Well, it's technically 30th because of tampering for Miami. So they have the 10th, the 30th, the 62nd, and the 94th. So they're positioned as usual to do some damage.
Okay, I'm going to give you a hypothetical question. You're the Eagles at the 30th pick, and I don't know what they did at 10. Knowing them, they probably moved up 8 spots and they grabbed someone. But Bijan Robinson's there at 30.
Yeah, I take him, but he's not going to be there. He won't be there at 30.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
You know, we know that's quote unquote, they don't take running backs in the first round. And Brady's talking about Dallas and Pollard and Zeke. And I think they have the 26th pick, and maybe they would move up. They'd be pressured to take them. Yeah. I understand that. But if he ever did slide, I mean, this guy is a game changer. And would you rather have him for 4 or 5 years or another year of Miles Sanders? That was kind of the game I was thinking of.
Well, talking about games, and this is a perfect near close of the segment. If he's there at Dallas at 26, Philadelphia has already moved up and taken him. because Jerry Jones talks and Howie Roseman acts. That's
correct.
That's just the name of the game. So let's start putting a little wrap on it in terms of Philadelphia's schedule is going to amp up. The Giants are getting better. Washington's decent. It's a first place schedule now. So we know they're going to have some revenge games with San Francisco. We know they're going to play Minnesota. Minnesota has a chance to move back up and so on and so forth. The bullseye is clearly on them. They may be a little bit weaker, as you mentioned, because they can't sign all of these guys. They had an interesting draft in 2022, and those guys were essentially redshirted in a way. We're going to see more of the defensive tackle. We'll see more of Dean and so on. So they're going to get year 2 contributions. What's realistic in terms of both a win total and odds for the division for Philadelphia come as we sit now without knowing what they're going to do in free agency and the draft?
I look at the division already. The Commanders releasing Carson Wentz. They bring in Bieniemy. Is it going to be Taylor Heineke, or are they going to bring in a veteran there? I look at the Giants. They're kind of pigeonholed. The franchise tag on Daniel Jones. Are they going to release and let Daniel Jones go and bring in a Carr or someone of that ilk there? And then you look at Dallas, and per Brady Tinker, they're going to, now that Dak's healthy, they plan to do a lot more RPOs with Dak, and they're expecting him to run the ball 6 to 8 times a game. It's the Philly division to win, no doubt about it. Dallas definitely second in command. Interesting to see, again, what the Giants do with the quarterback situation with Daniel Jones and, of course, Saquon Barkley. They released Galladay, which I don't think he passed this year. I mean, but the fact is, off the top of my head, without seeing the schedule, I would have to have them double digit. I could basically see I think a soft 11 and 11 and a half without seeing their schedule, I think is a fair number for them.
It'll be interesting. One thing before I let you go that I forgot to cover is we've got new coaches in the arena now because their coaches were purged. Your thoughts on the coaching changes?
Before I got on, I was just reading up on them. When you're good, this happens, okay?
Yeah.
So, for us in New England, unfortunately, it doesn't happen where they pick them from us and they don't succeed and they just happen to come back. And this year it was Patricia and Joe Judge came back. What a disaster that was. At least we got Bill O'Brien. I am going to keep my eyes and ears glued here. I don't think they're going to skip a beat. I really don't. I think the head coach has got a solid rap on the team, on the locker. And I don't want to be corny and say it's next man up, but I think they've done a great job. And I think everyone's all in. And once you get a taste and a bite of that apple, this team, especially, they're young, they're talented on both sides of the ball. I think they'll come right back together and they'll be even chomping more at the bit.
Okay. My closing thought is, okay, they have the draft choices 10 and 30. They're probably going to move one way, shape, or form in those. But I think they're going to look trenches. I think they're going to look to maybe replace one of those free agents lost on the DL. We don't know if Kelsey is coming back. He may retire. His replacement was handpicked, so he'll be there. But Hurts was sacked, I think it was 44 times, if I remember. Let's see if I have the number. 44 times he was sacked. So a little bit of tinkering on the offensive line wouldn't hurt, but that's where I would be.
And before we close, what we didn't address, when you do something that's so successful in the NFL, not no more, they're going to take away that quarterback sneak and the scrum, the rugby push.
Right.
So it'll be interesting to see. I mean, I think they were, I don't know, 30 for 33 or some stupid, ungodly number. So the NFL is going to take that away, but I think they'll be one step ahead and they'll figure a way to do it. So.
Yeah, an interesting thing. Philly brought it to light. When I tweeted that out in the middle of the game and I got like 8,000 likes or views or responses or something like that, it wasn't meant to be, hey, Philly's getting away with it. The league's getting away with it. And so we'll see what happens there. Jeff, thank you so much for your time. This is number 31 and counting. A good look at Philadelphia. Really appreciate it. Thanks so much for joining me on this. I only have one more, and it's the champs. It's the Kansas City Chiefs. So you're busy. I know that. You got other sports to cover. So talk about that briefly, and then we'll wrap it up.
Yeah, for us, it's just changing gears. We have the conference championships and March Madness in full bloom. In less than about 8 days, the WBC kicks off, and then we'll be into MLB at the start of April, and we're covering some golf. I had Brady Cannon on earlier today talking the Arnold Palmer Invitational, and then we'll get ready for the Players Championship. So we're staying busy and active. We're following all the people that we have to. We're waiting for the calls to come back saying, hey, OTAs, draft day, which me and you will be talking about. And then next thing you know, it's back to, the start of football again, like we had no time off.
Yeah. One day at a time, one day at a time. Thanks again, Jeff, for joining me. Thanks for everybody who's watching. Subscribe if you like us. And then we'll see you with Kansas City a little bit later today. Thanks a lot.